Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another week of the Hit the Green podcast. I'm your host once again, Brandon Towers, ready to get into it again this week. Like I mentioned on the show last week, we are in a really unique situation. We go right back to the same golf course we saw last week. We're at the Memorial this week, but we will be playing again at Muirfield Village like we saw last week. So per usual, we'll get into a recap of the Workday Charity Open last week. Last week's event was awesome. We'll also be, of course, rolling something up and smoking that as well. So I'll let you know what I'm smoking there. Hoping that you guys had a good week. I did get some positive feedback on the player pool from Workday Charity. So definitely it was a strong player pool. And in our max entry, the player pool was great. It was just some of the combinations didn't come together for us, unfortunately. We had a few lineups that were so close. If only we could have swapped, one spot out for another player in our player pool. And it's not like we didn't own the guys we needed to. It's just that the right combination didn't get put together. So in honor of just missing out, we're going to go ahead and roll something up, get to smoking. Today, I'm going to be smoking King's Garden is the grower. We are smoking Gelato is the strain. So Gelato is an indica dominant hybrid. It's testing at 21.22% THC. And as a matter of fact, I figured I'd show you guys a little trick I like with my joints. Been doing this since, I started smoking back in college. So to light the joint, you go ahead and after you're done rolling it, of course, you go ahead and twist tie the top sort of. So you can see how I've twist tied the top there. After twist tying the top, go ahead and press down on the end of the joint. That's going to create this sort of ridge here at the top. You can see there's a ridge here at the top. From that point, you take your lighter, follow all along that ridge you've just created. And once you've done that, you grab your twist tie, and it should come right off. And now we're ready to spark up. And for those of you on the audio version, if you want to see what I just did, I definitely recommend you go to the YouTube channel and check out the video version on YouTube. All right, let's get right into the recap, shall we, for Workday Charity. Awesome event. Once again, I feel like all the events since the tour's return have been unbelievable. It seems like every single event there's been the threat of a playoff, and we did get one this time around. Again, Colin Morikawa finds himself as a party of the playoff, this time taking on Justin Thomas, and this time coming away with a win. The 18th was very interesting for Morikawa after JT missed the par putt to win outright. Morikawa almost had another nightmare of a short putt, and we've seen him struggle with these. He had that putt on his 72nd hole do a full 360 really, and it rattled and found the bottom of the cup to his credit. In the playoff, that first playoff hole, JT drains about a 52-footer to put the birdie on the board. And you think it's over, especially for a guy like Morikawa, who's shown that down the stretch his putter is not something he can normally count on. But it was a different story this week. The guy coming off of his first miscut in his career pours one in from 25 feet on that first playoff hole to put one right on top of JT. And then from there, JT really just got stymied off the tee, hit his tee shot, found pretty unlucky. It found the right rough, and it was right behind a pretty skinny tree, quite honestly. It's unfortunate for JT. But great win by Morikawa. Answers the question I asked last week, what are we going to see from this kid after the first miscut? What's his mental fortitude? Will we see him bounce back? Well, he answered the bell. We know what this kid's made of. He now has 2 wins on tour in his young career. And like I said, and that might have been the first episode of Hit the Green, or maybe the second episode, he really, really might be the best iron player since, dare I say, Tiger Woods. And speaking of Tiger Woods, the man is back this week. Finally, the tour has Tiger back. So more eyes, I should say, will certainly be on the tour this week. We've already had Millionaire Makers every single week, so we're really not probably going to see much larger prize pools for DraftKings, but certainly we could see a larger diversity of contests because when Tiger's in the field, we see more people play daily fantasy sports in the PGA sphere. So excited to have Tiger back. Of course, he is the GOAT. He's my favorite player. You'll notice we've changed venues for the video this week because I want to make sure we have this guy in the background to give us some good mojo this week. So awesome that Tiger's back. We can get into that a little bit more once we start breaking down the event because I do think he is viable this week. But to finish the recap, some other things I wanted to touch on that happened last week that are worth noting moving forward. Victor Hovland, the incredible ball striking continues. I mean, this guy, tee to green, week in and week out at this point, is one of the top players. So Hovland, definitely someone we're going to have to keep an eye on. Similarly to Bryson, if he has, one of these putting weeks where, he doesn't even have to pace the field like Bryson did in his win at Rocket Mortgage. If he has a putting week where he's just, top 25 in the field, it feels like Hovland's due to run away with one of these events in a win. And that's a lot to say for a player as young as Hovland, but the ball striking really has been that phenomenal. So we'll want to keep an eye on Hovland. And again, he'll be someone that we like this week, being that we are playing the exact same track, albeit it will be a little bit different this week. We're gonna look at Victor Hovland this week, certainly. A player last week that we hopped off of, and we hopped off him, of course, at the worst time. Jason Day finishes T7. Really should have stuck on the Day train. He was in the player pool, but not someone I touted in last week's video, or podcast. So really should have stayed on that Jason Day train as long as he was priced as low as he was, and the ownership was coming in as low as it was, because look, guys, long term, we know what type of player Jason Day is. And if there's no, nagging injury to suggest that he wasn't going to turn it around at some point, it made sense that eventually he was going to start to get trending in the right direction. So unfortunate that we missed out on being able to be way overweight to the field on Day last week, but we did at least have him in the player pool. And he's, one of those guys that I wish would have been rotated into the few lineups that really had a chance to win, but were just missing one piece of the combination. So Jason Day had a great finish this week. The price has gone up. The ownership seems about in check, but not as into Day at this point in time. It seems like the buy early opportunity has now passed potentially. Brooks Koepka. Oh man, we owned a lot of Brooks last week. Missed the cut by a shot. He finished at 1 under. Really needed that cut to stay at 1 under, man. Max Homa as well finished at that 1 under number, and it would have been a much better week had we been able to keep that cut at -1. I'll tell you that much. But Brooks, I mean, he got off to a horrid start. I think he was 4 over at one point, and then just on his back 9 on Friday, he caught fire. He put about 5 approach shots inside of 7 feet, most of those inside of 3 feet, and ended up missing the cut by 1 shot. So Brooks, although it was a poor performance, of course, being a missed cut, saw a lot from him down the stretch, and we can forgive one bad round given that Brooks really, he had it going to close there Friday. So Brooks will certainly be someone we want to keep an eye on, and even though he missed the cut as well by a shot, Max Homa still rating phenomenally in our model. So a guy that we will go back to. We won't make the Jason Day mistake. We're going to stick on the Homa train until it pays off. So our Millie Maker, again, the player pool was great. The combinations weren't. A T7 from Chuck Hoffman. What a phenomenal performance from him. Love that the model turned him out as a great play, because having leverage on Hoffman this week was a moneymaker. We had a 5 out of 6 lineup with Jason Kokrak. Really just needed that to be, either, as I mentioned, Jason Day or maybe Ian Poulter, both players who were in our player pool. And that lineup is streaking toward a phenomenal finish. So the model was great last week. The exposures, not so much, and that's why we didn't land on the correct combination, but the model certainly churned out the right plays. So we're not tinkering with it too much heading into this week, given that we are on the same golf course. But we will see some changes heading into this week that ultimately will affect the winning score of the golf tournament, but I don't want to make a complete overhaul to my model as a result of the changes that we'll see this week. One other thing, actually, I wanted to touch on from last week, the Kevin Streelman ownership. So he's projected at about like 16% ownership, 17% ownership per the video last week. He came in like at 8.5%. And I ended up playing less of him because I didn't think he was worth the 17% ownership. But man, this is why monitoring ownership throughout the week is so crucial. If you can get that edge and understand where people are going to come in, had I known he were coming in at 8.5%, I would have been well over the field on Kevin Streelman. I ended up matching the field, but as I mentioned last week, the model loved him. It loves him again this week, and he looks like he's due for higher ownership this week as well, which may stick due to his performance last week. But I'll certainly be monitoring Streelman's ownership all the way up until lock. The projection is on his ownership this week because he rates out well once again. So let's go ahead and get into the course breakdown, although a lot of it will be similar. We'll talk about what'll be a little bit different this week at Muirfield as they get ready for the Memorial. They certainly want to make it a more difficult golf tournament than the WORKDAY was last week. So there will be a few changes. So we're going to get a little more into this. I'm going to get a drink of water and we'll get into the Memorial. Very light strain. Almost feels like I'm breathing air. Doesn't feel like I'm really smoking. Clean weed, I guess. Okay, so give you guys a reminder, Muirfield Village Golf Club in my home state of Ohio, Dublin, Ohio, just outside of Columbus, Ohio. It's a par 72, plays at 7,392 yards. The greens are bent grass. It's a Nicholas design, nicknamed Jack's Place. So you might hear that. If you hear people referring to Jack's Place, they're referring to the track there at Muirfield Village. And they're certainly going to try and make the course play more difficult than it did last week. They're going to try to make play more difficult this week than it did last week. You will see 72 new pin locations this week. Nicholas made sure that the tournament committee last week did not use a single pin location that he had in mind for the Memorial this week. They will let the rough here grow out. Given that the workday ended on Sunday, that gives them about 3.5, 4 days to let the rough grow out. So I don't suspect it's drastically longer, but they will let it grow out during the time between the workday and the Memorial. And I imagine with these pin positions, that's where they try to make the tournament more difficult. That coupled with the green speeds, which are going to be pretty lightning, particularly in comparison to last week when the greens were running an 11 on the stimp. This week we're looking at a 13 or a 14, somewhere in that range on the stimp. And that's going to be quick. So particularly for those guys that did play in this event last week, it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment to get used to these fast greens. And I wouldn't be surprised if some players aren't able to do it, at least quickly enough to make the cut. So it's going to be interesting to see how much, and we'll get into the ownership, how much people are leaning on last week, and how we see that bear out in the ownership projections. But we could see some guys struggle on getting used to these greens, given that they're playing the same track. And mentally, they're going to feel like it's the same thing that they were playing last week. But they're really going to have to make sure that they realize it's going to set up as a different golf course, especially with the speeds of these greens. So by all means, we still want to take last week's results into account. But if people are being overowned based on their performance last week, there are ways that this golf course can jump up and grab them. So we just want to keep that in mind. To remind you, there are 4 par 5s here, being a par 72. The 7th hole being the one that's probably the hardest to reach into. It's a double dog leg, so really the bombers are the ones that'll get home into there. We have the par 3s in the ranges of 185 to 200 yards. There's a couple in that 185-yard range, a couple in that 200-yard range. So if you're someone that likes to target guys that can play the par 3s well, those are the approach ranges you want to target, the 185 and the 200 range. As far as the model's concerned, not changing much from last week. We're looking for the same golfer prototype that we were last week. Strokes gained approach, strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained on those par fives. Again, the model performed for us last week. It was just the exposures and the ownership really shifted a lot throughout the week. So keeping tabs on ownership was very difficult last week. FantasyNational.com does a great job with their ownership projections. Sometimes when popular opinion swings late in the week, these things happen. So we'll really want to make sure we monitor the ownership this week. But as far as the model's concerned, yeah, it was strong. So really excited coming into this week. It's a unique opportunity. Tiger's back. We're at the same venue in back-to-back weeks. I think it's certainly going to affect ownership. So let's go ahead and get into those top shelf plays, shall we? I think I let this joint go out during that recap. Okay, so this field this week, before I get into the top shelf plays, is absolutely stacked. It is jam-packed with talent. It is another one of these major tournament type fields that we're going to see this week for Jack's Invitational. So the pricing's going to be really soft. You're going to be able to make some very, very strong lineups, some lineups with some very strong golfers, especially if you live in the 9 and 8K range, which I really like this week, and we'll get into. But it's a stacked field. So just want to keep that in mind before we go ahead and get into our plays. And also, Patrick Cantlay's your defending champion again. He shot minus 19. I suspect the play is a bit more difficult this year, again, given that they want to have some sort of contrast from last week's event. So I imagine the winning score comes in, maybe more in that minus 10 range. But yeah, with that, into the top shelf plays. $10,000 in Draftkings salary or more. Our first top shelf play, and he seems to be a mainstay of the show since I started this podcast because he's just been in phenomenal form, and what he's doing to the golf ball is insane. It's Bryson DeChambeau. He's the most expensive player on the slate, and I can't argue with it. At $11,100, he's projected for 11.9% ownership. And look, I mean, at this point, I shouldn't have to tell you why you're playing Bryson. I think you figured it out yourself at this point. If you want to hear the numbers, he ranks 5th in the model, 3rd tee to green, 21st on approach, 4th on the par fives. I mean, the guy he's been phenomenal. So recent form is of no question. We can go ahead and take a look at his tournament history, but I believe he's won the Memorial maybe a couple years ago, as a matter of fact. Yeah, he won in 2018, so clearly his upside's a win. Yeah, I'm not going to blame you if you play Bryson, even at this $11,100 price tag. I do love the 8 and 9K range, so I will be having plenty of lineups where I start in that 9K range and I forego this top range, the top shelf plays. But if I am grabbing people up top, Bryson's probably the first name I'm looking to. And I only have 2 other top shelf plays, so I should easily be able to match the field on these 3 guys. Given that I'm only playing 3 of them, and there aren't many players priced above $10,000 because the field's so stacked, right? The pricing had to be so soft. So if you want to grab Bryson at $11,100, you're probably going to have to take a stab at one of the players in the high 6K range at the very least, but or you can maybe live in the 7K range more for the rest of your plays. But at 11.9% projected ownership, I like Bryson DeChambeau. Top shelf play number 2 is Rory McIlroy at $10,700 on DraftKings. He's projected at 16.7% ownership. And the ownership number seems about right to me. Most weeks Rory's going to be the highest priced player on the slate. This week he's the 3rd highest priced player. JT sandwiched in between he and Bryson at $10,900. So getting a $200 discount off of JT to go to Rory, I like it. JT, of course, coming off the playoff last week, clearly can get around Muirfield Village very well, very competently. But man, if I can grab the number 1 player in the world at the 3rd highest price and really his ownership's in check, I have no problems with it. He ranks 6th in the model. He's 4th tee to green, 29th on approach, 2nd on the par fives. Yeah, and you know, Rory's one of those guys who can run away with any tournament, especially if the putter gets hot. So I'll certainly be trying to match the field on Rory McIlroy this week at that 16.7% projected ownership. $10,700 seems like a bit of a discount. I would have flip-flopped Rory and JT's pricing personally. But I think JT's getting a little bit of that recency bias for coming off the playoff on the same track last week. But let's go ahead and fire up Rory at $10,700. The last top shelf play is, and I'm surprised he's this low owned, Dustin Johnson at $10,300, 11.8% projected ownership. And DJ has great course history here. DJ is in phenomenal form, of course. I mean, the last time we saw him was that win, correct? Let me double check here. Yeah, the last time we saw him was his win at Travelers, and he had a 17th at Heritage before that. So DJ's coming into phenomenal form. He gained 6 strokes on approach at Travelers and 7.3 strokes tee to green at Travelers. Yeah, I think the fact that we didn't see him last week is giving us a bit of an ownership discount. The price is certainly fair. As far as that tournament history I alluded to is concerned, in 2018 he had a T8. He was cut in 2017. Then he had a solo third in 2016 and a T13 in 2015. So certainly capable of making some good scores around this course. And over those 4 rounds, he's actually gained 20.76 strokes against the field. So it's about 5 strokes gained per tournament, which, you know, if the putter gets hot, DJ will be in contention this week. So the ownership here on DJ is very surprising for me. It won't be easy for me, or it won't be difficult for me, I'm sorry, to get overweight to the field on DJ. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Between of these top 3 plays, Bryson and DJ are my favorite to go up and spend for, particularly because they have that lower ownership. If you want to, I think I would lean, actually, I said Bryson earlier. I think I would lean DJ because the $800 on this slate means a lot. I really don't like much in the bottom of the $6,000 range or really in the mid $6,000 range. There are a couple plays that I feel okay with at the high $6,000 range, but you're really going to want to live in that sort of balance build mold this week. So saving that $800 if you need it, going down from Bryson to DJ makes sense. But if you feel comfortable grabbing one of those guys down there in that 6K range, by all means, feel free to fire up Bryson. And like I mentioned, that's all we have for the top shelf plays this week. I believe it was only 5 players priced over $10,000 this week on DraftKings, which speaks to how strong this field is. Yeah, it was 5 players, ending with Morikawa at $10,000, who great win last week, but it's an overpricing in my opinion. There are some players behind Morikawa that I would rather play. So let's get into the mid-shelf plays here. First mid-shelf play, and he was a play of ours last week. He's your defending champion. It's Patrick Cantlay, $9,800, 21.1% projected ownership. And I just mentioned Morikawa was overpriced. It seems we shouldn't get Cantlay cheaper than Morikawa. We just shouldn't. So Cantlay, of course, with the great course history here, as far as the model's concerned, he's ranking in at 7th. He's 6th tee to green. He's 9th on approach. He's 24th on the par fives. And Cantlay just has unbelievable consistency. He's a cash lock. Go ahead and fire this guy up in cash. In GPPs, he's got upside as well. Don't love the 21.1% ownership projection, and I will likely be underweight to the field on Cantlay just because that's going to be a lofty number to get to, but by no means am I going to fade him. And I'll try to get as close to that number as I can, but there are just some guys below him that I really like and that are coming in lower owned than Cantlay. So love Cantlay this week. I'd be remiss if I don't mention him. If you wanna fire him up, do so at will. And if you're making, 1, 2, or 3 lineups, all you have to do is get them in one of those three. Let's say if you're making 3 lineups and you're overweight to the field on a guy that brings a very high floor and also a high ceiling as well. So even at the 21.1% ownership, I'm comfortable playing Patrick Cantlay this week. The next mid-shelf play is Webb Simpson at $9,600, 14% projected ownership. And Webb's just been in unbelievable form, right? When we see Webb, let's take a look at Webb's stroke gained data over the last few events here. Webb, by the way, rating 18th in the model, 9th tee to green, 4th on approach, 90th on the par 5s. So that would be the concern. But if we can get Webb to run a hot putter, he can run hotter than that number, certainly, if he's wedging it and then draining some putts. So at RBC Heritage, of course, where Webb won, he gained 5.7 strokes on approach and 7.2 strokes tee to green. And at Rocket Mortgage, he gained 4.6 strokes on approach and 5.8 strokes tee to green. Yeah, he's in great form. He does putt better on Bermuda than he does on bent. So this isn't his preferred putting surface, and that take that for what it's worth. But Webb's viable on any green surface, on any putting surface, right? And putting is something that has a little more variance in it than ball striking. So the ball striking stats that I just read off to you really should be what you weigh more heavily. So love Webb Simpson at this price. 14% ownership is certainly fair. I will be overweight to the field if I can be. I will certainly at least match the field. So love Webb Simpson at $9,600. And I like I mentioned, I love all of the $9,000 and $8,000 range almost. Like this is the bread and butter range right here. You can live in this range all day. So as many guys I think that you can grab out of this $9,000 and $8,000 range in a single lineup, I think that's probably going to be the build that gets it done. At least in my opinion, you can build some really strong lineups that way. So I suggest you play around with it a little bit. The next guy I like, again in the $9,000 range, $9,500, it's Victor Hovland. And I mentioned the ball striking and how absolutely insane it's been. But let's go ahead and give you some numbers to chew on as far as that's concerned. Because if this guy gets the putter going, he's going to be dangerous. He's rating out second in our model, second tee to green, first on approach, 14th strokes gained on the par 5s. And this is the last 24 measured rounds, all these stats I've been giving you per fantasynational.com. Hovland, in the last few events, the ball striking's just been ridiculous. I can't believe he hasn't won. Came in third last week at the WORKDAY. Gained 6.5 strokes on approach, 15 strokes tee to green. Gained 15 strokes tee to green. Lost 1.4 putting. I mean, if the putter's even like okay, this guy's gonna win. So love Victor Hovland. The ownership is up there, but I think it's justified. I mean, at Rocket Mortgage gained 5.5 strokes on approach, 9.6 tee to green. The Travelers gained 7.8 strokes on approach, 10.6 tee to green. Heritage gained 3.9 strokes on approach, 6.1 tee to green. I mean, this guy's a ball striking machine. Seems like he's trending upward too in the ball striking department, which is scary. And I don't even know if it's possible, but man, if we can just get Hovland to putt neutrally, then he's going to be at the top of the leaderboard come Sunday, and you're going to be glad that you rostered him in DraftKings. So I'll be owning a lot of Hovland. I'll make sure to match the field on him, even at this ownership projection of 17.3%. The $9,500 price tag, I am more than okay with. This guy's ball striking it's been pure, and that's exactly what we want to see around this track. So go ahead and fire up Victor Hovland at $9,500. The next play, and he's rating number one back-to-back weeks in our model, given that we're playing the same course, that's no surprise. It's Hideki Matsuyama at $9,400. He has 14.5% projected ownership. And yeah, I mean, same reasons as last week, right? He's first in this field tee to green, second on approach, sixth in the par 5s over the last 24 measured rounds. And I mean, we saw what he did to this golf course last week. He left a little bit out there, as a matter of fact. Let's go ahead and pull Hideki's strokes gain data and take a look at what he did last week around Muirfield. So he gained 5.5 strokes on approach and 9 strokes tee to green. Exactly what we want to see out of Hideki. Just like Hovland, hopefully he can get the putter turned around and just get a lucky putting week. Be neutral with the putter, and we'll be happy with him at this price. The ownership's fair. I love Hideki this week. Hideki at $9,400. And if you want to start a lineup, Hovland, Matsuyama, or I'm not even sure if you can maybe start a lineup Simpson, Hovland, Matsuyama, or if that would cash strap you too much. Let's take a look. Hovland, Matsuyama leaves you 77.75. Okay, so with Simpson, Hovland, Matsuyama, you have $7,167 left per player, I guess, which would leave you maybe in the low 8s. Now you're going to have to play someone in that mid-6 range. So I wouldn't play all 3 up there, but you can certainly mix and match 2 of the 3, starting with Simpson, Hovland, Matsuyama. And even one of these next players getting down into the low $9,000 range. I can't overstate how stacked the 9 and 8K ranges are. You should really be trying to live here if you can. And if you end up with, a little more salary, you can get up to a DJ, or you can get up to a Bryson, or you can get up to a Rory, then absolutely. If there's someone in that 6K range that you like in particular, then you can save and get up to those guys, then you should do that. But if you're feeling wishy-washy like I am about those guys down there in that pricing range, I think living in this 9 and 8K range is the way to go this week. And the next player in this range that I like is Jon Rahm, and he's coming in at a $9,300 price tag, which is kind of disrespectful, I feel like. He rates 17th in the model, 15th tee to green, 53rd on approach, and 19th on the par 5. So clearly he has to get the approach numbers together. But I mean, this is a top 5 player in the world. Last week around this golf course, he gained 4 strokes on approach, gained 5.1 tee to green. I mean, this is too cheap for Jon Rahm. And it does make sense that his ownership is where it's at, because everyone's in agreement. Actually, his ownership projection it's 15.5%. Yeah, which is fair. This is too cheap for Jon Rahm. We're getting a huge discount on him. There's a buy low opportunity. So again, this 9K range, there are going to be some decisions to be made, but if you live here, then you should be able to get pieces of all of these guys. If you're playing, a handful of lineups, you should be able to get a piece of all of these guys. As far as Rahm's course history is concerned, of course, last week he played decently, as I mentioned. He's only played the Memorial once in 2017, and he got cut. So the course history is not great, but the player is, and at this price tag, he's just too cheap. So go ahead and fire up Jon Rahm at $9,300. The next player I like is Xander Schauffele at $9,200, 14.4% projected ownership. Schauffele seems to rise to the occasion in these stacked fields, which I like, of course. As far as our model's concerned, Schauffele rates out 14th. He's 25th tee to green, 24th on approach, and 25th in the strokes gained par 5 department. So yeah, a really well-rounded game for what we're looking for here. So yeah, that's over the last 24 measured rounds, as I mentioned. Schauffele, someone that again in these stacked fields we can count on to be hyper competitive, right? Last year he came T14 in this event. In 2018 he got cut, but the T14 last year shows us that clearly he has some upside around this track, and truly his upside's to win this event, because he has won plenty of events with stacked fields. I mean, he's won a tour championship, so he can win in any given event any week. So Schauffele again at $9,200, and like I mentioned, the choices, the decisions that are going to have to be made in this $9,000 range are abundant. So if you can play more lineups, or maybe step down to a smaller dollar amount tournament so you can enter more lineups and really pepper this $9,000 and $8,000 range, I like that approach this week. because the next player I like at $9,100 is Brooks Koepka at 11.5% projected ownership. And I mentioned Koepka, Koepka went on fire to end his second round. He's clearly had some rust to knock off on Thursday and got off to a little bit of a shaky start on Friday as well. But man, coming home, he was on fire. He was unconscious. So 11.5% projected ownership for a player this good, and at $9,100, Brooks is another guy I like in this $9,000 range. As far as the model's concerned, I don't believe he rates out as well as some of these other guys. Let's see. Yeah, Brooksy actually coming in at 51st, 44th tee to green, 85th on approach, and 40th on the par 5. So, you know, I'm going counterintuitive to the model here. I think he was trending, mid-round Friday-ish, maybe after that Thursday round. He's trending in the right direction, and we know what Brooks is once he gets to that final form. So I like Brooks Koepka. It seems too cheap for him. The ownership is more than fair at 11.5%. So I like Brooks as well. So you really can't go wrong so far in this $9,000 range. And there's still one player we will get to who I also like in this $9,000 range, who I'm hoping doesn't pull excessive ownership, but he might just because of who he is. And you can probably guess who he is. It's Tiger Woods at $9,000 flat, 13.9% projected ownership. And Tiger doesn't lace him up very often, but when he does, man, he's competitive. As far as the model's concerned, Tiger's coming in 13th. He ranks 26th tee to green, 31st on approach, and 12th on the par 5s. And he's Tiger Woods. I mean, the dude crushes it at Memorial. He had a T9 last year, T23 the year prior. Hadn't played it a couple years before that, but he can clearly play well around this golf course. He is a phenomenal iron player, which is what we want to see here at Muirfield. So yeah, I think Tiger comes ready to play this week, of course, since this is the first event we're seeing him at since the return of the PGA Tour. So if you're a Tiger fan, I think it all lines up for him as well this week. So not just from a fanboy perspective, but also the numbers bear out that Tiger could be a good play. And $9,000 is a fair price tag. And if he does truly come in at 13.9% ownership, that's fair as well. But Tiger's a guy you really have to monitor that projected ownership on, because he's such a popular guy and player that it can balloon very, very quickly. And we want to monitor that because even as great as the great Tiger Woods is, and he is the GOAT, there's an ownership that we will fade him at. So Tiger Woods, $9,000 flat, 13.9% projected ownership. And we're finally out of the $9,000 range. So the first player in the $8,000 range that I want to talk about is Daniel Berger at $8,700. 18.7% projected ownership has me not feeling great. Man, but he's a perfect fit, and he's been in phenomenal form. So not someone that you can full fade, someone that you're going to have to put in one lineup, but 18% is in a field this stacked with some of the guys I'm going to get to priced below him. If it rises even a tick above that, I'm going to lean toward fading and fading pretty hard. Tournament history, he's got a 67th in 2016, and he was cut in 2015. Hasn't played the event since. So that's certainly not inspiring. As far as the model's concerned, he rates out well. Berger's coming in 10th in the model, 8th tee to green, 10th on approach, and 42nd on the par 5s in the last 24 measured rounds. So, of course, the model loves him because, man, this guy's been in great form. But if that ownership ticks any higher, and even where it's at, the course history is enough that, you can justify a fade on Berger. But I will certainly not be fading. I might be a little underweight to the field, but I think he warrants some ownership because I think his upside's to win the event. I mean, we've seen what he can do here as of late. He's been at the top of leaderboards. So Daniel Berger at $8,700, I like this week. The player price right below him I like as well. It's Gary Woodland at $8,600, 12.9% projected ownership. And Woodland had a good finish last week. Hopefully he can, just get hot with the putter. And if Woodland gets hot with the putter, he'll be live here. He ranks 15th in the model, 36th tee to green, 12th on approach, 21st on the par fives. So he's checking all the boxes here. A very well-rounded guy for what we want around here. As far as his tournament history is concerned, let's see here. Woodland has played it all of the last 5 years. T52 last year, T32 in 2018, T49 in 2017, T4 in 2016 is his best finish, and he was cut in 2015. Not worried about that, of course. Different player now than he was then. So yeah, he's got upside, and the ownership percentage seems fair. I think it appears that Berger's stealing a lot of the ownership that maybe would be going to Woodland, and the player price below him is also taking his ownership. So I like going to Woodland, who's sandwiched in between Berger and this next guy we're going to talk about. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into the next guy. It's Abraham Answer at $8,500, and he's projected for 18.7% ownership. I mean, don't get me wrong, Answer is in incredible form, and he is a great fit for what you want to see around here. So if you're playing a lot of lineups, certainly it would be foolish to full fade a guy like Abraham Answer. But if you're just playing a few, I think you can justify it. He ranks 11th in the model, 10th tee to green, 14th on approach, 55th on the par five. So that's not great on the par fives, but certainly checking the other boxes. And I mean, it's that performance at Heritage that's making the models pop, right? Gained 11.8 strokes on approach. 11.8. Oh my goodness. 13.7 tee to green. He came solo second and lost strokes both putting and around the green. Lost a stroke putting and lost a stroke and a half around the green. And then at Travelers, he backed it up with another strong performance with the ball striking, gained 4.2 on approach, 5.1 tee to green. So I get why Abraham Answer's popping, but the price it's a fair price for Answer, but the ownership is too high, quite honestly. Again, I won't full fade in 150 lineups, but if you're playing a few, I think he's a guy that you can maybe just hope has a little rust after not playing last week, and maybe doesn't get off to a hot enough start Thursday and has to try to claw himself out of a hole and maybe misses a cut. So I do like Answer, but pay attention to his ownership. If we get a Streelman situation like last week where Streelman ended up coming much lower owned than anticipated, then certainly fire up Answer because he is a great fit around this track. The next player I like is Patrick Reed at $8,400, and Reed's just a guy I think has a lot of win equity every week, and the ownership usually doesn't reflect that. He's projected at 10.3% ownership, which is a little bit higher than I expected, but I think it's fair, and I think I'll match the field on it. As far as the model's concerned, Reed is ranking 24th. He's 28th tee to green, 69th on approach, and 15th on the par fives over the last 24 measured rounds per fantasynational.com. Reed's just a guy that has a lot of win equity, I believe, in my opinion. And, at 10% ownership, I'll gladly fire him up. I think he's a guy that just is lower owned because people don't like him. As far as the Memorial's concerned, he came T29 in 2018, T57 in 2017, T8 in 2016, and T26 in 2015. So he hasn't missed a cut here in his last 4 go-arounds. So Reed at $8,400 for his win equity. I think the price is a bit of a discount. And I think the ownership's a bit of a discount too because of how little he's liked by people that watch the PGA Tour and probably play DraftKings golf. But it's not how well you're liked, it's how many DraftKings points you score. So let's go ahead and fire up Patrick Reed at $8,400. Priced right below him, and we'll finally get out of the $8,000 range after this. And again, that $8,000 and $9,000 range is crazy. It's Tony Finau at $8,300. Surprised to see projected at 10.3% ownership, which is he'll definitely come in over that. I'll say that right now. I don't see Finau coming in at 10.3% projected ownership. He's always a DraftKings darling, especially at this price at $8,300. The guy makes so many birdies. He again, as I mentioned, it's probably echoing myself, but he scores so many more DraftKings points than he places typically, than his placement points would suggest, just because he makes so many birdies and he can make eagles. We have the par fives this week, so I definitely like Finau at $8,300. The model is Finau at 23rd. He's 16th tee to green, 41st on approach, and surprisingly 68th on the par fives over the last 24 rounds. So if Tony can turn that around, we know Tony, historically good on the par fives, can, as I mentioned, roll in some eagles here and there. If we can get a good performance from Tony on the par fives this week, he's going to more than pay off this salary. And at 10.3% projected ownership, yeah, fire up Tony Finau at $8,300, and then we can get out of the $8,000 range and into the $7,000 at $7,900. I like Paul Casey. 13.1% projected ownership. I believe we haven't seen Casey since Travelers. Is that correct? Casey rating 9th in the model, 12th tee to green, 13th on approach, and 27th on the par fives over the last 24 measured rounds. And the last time we saw Casey was indeed at Travelers. He gained 2.3 strokes on approach, 5.9 strokes tee to green. That's what we want to see. He's gained on approach and tee to green in his last three events. So, Paul Casey at in the $7,000 range is kind of eye popping. I think he's going to be a very popular cash play, and I think his ownership comes in higher than what they have it projected at right now at 13.1%. But at this price, I mean, I can't argue with Paul Casey. So fire up Paul Casey at $7,900. I think I might slightly prefer the guy priced right below him, though, in Mark Leishman at $7,800, because he's only projected at 6.1% ownership. And I could actually see it coming in lower than that. He burned a lot of people last week with that miscut, and a horrid miscut at that. Like, he wasn't even close. He did not have his best stuff, not even close to it. But, it's not like Leishman has been in bad form for a while now or anything like that. So it could just be that, he just didn't play all that well last week, right? It happens sometimes. Sometimes you just need a bounce back week. So it's the first event he's lost on approach in his last 7 events. He lost 1.7 strokes on approach last week, lost 0.8 strokes tee to green. So it was the putter that really hurt him. He lost 3.8 strokes on the greens last week. So at Travelers, he gained 3.3 strokes on approach, 1.1 tee to green. He gained 3.9 at the Charles Schwab, 0.6 tee to green. He gained 4.6 on approach at the API, the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and had 6.5 strokes gained tee to green. So Leishman's been striking it well. Maybe not great off the tee, but his approach numbers are stellar, and they're propping up his tee to green numbers to the point that this is a serious discount on Mark Leishman. And if he gets hot with the putter, I mean, this guy won an event how long ago? What, at the Farmers? Yeah, in January. So we know he's got upside. So at this projected ownership, and I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if it comes in even lower, because as I mentioned, I think the ownership on Finau comes in higher. I think the ownership on Casey comes in higher. Particularly Casey will be the guy stealing the ownership away. I think we can get a really good deal on Mark Leishman this week. So go ahead and fire up Leishman at $7,800, 6.1% projected ownership. His tournament history here is great as well. Leishman has a 5th place in 2019, T62 in 2018, T15 in 2017, T11 in 2016, and T5 in 2015. So easily the top 5 upside, as he's already done it twice. He hasn't missed a cut here in the last 5 go-rounds. I mean, yeah, I love Leishman, particularly at this projected ownership. We have to hope that last week was a bit of an anomaly, which, given the ball striking numbers prior to last week, it very well could be. The last player I like for the mid-range plays before we get into the SCHWAG bag is Kevin Streelman, again reappearing on the picks list for the HTG pod at $7,600, 14.8% projected ownership. And again, we're going to have to monitor this ownership because it looked like it was going to be about 17% last week, came in at 8.5%. Maybe people step off Streelman. I doubt it because of his great performance last week. But even at 14.8%, a guy I will have shares of. I might not be able to get all the way up to matching the field because there are so many quality names that I've mentioned that we've gone through. But if indeed Streelman's ownership drops, I'll be sure to get overweight to the field on him. I'll tell you that much. Course history at a fourth place in 2019, T44 in 2018, T13 in 2017, T8 in 2016, and T18 in 2015. He's one of the strongest course histories in this entire field. And to boot, he rates phenomenally in the model. He's rating out 8th, 14th tee to green, 17th on approach, and still first on the par fives, which is blowing my mind. Maybe that's being carried a little bit by a hot putter, but man, it seems like everything's checking out for Streelman. I'll go back to him this week. I think you should go back to him as well. And now we can get into our swag bag plays after I get some more water. We'll polish off this joint, and we'll see if we can hit some bombs, man. This week's going to be tough, but if you can hit someone that can top 10 for you in this range down here in the low sevens, or from all the way down to the bottom sixes to the low sevens, you're going to have a huge edge over the field. So that's the goal this week. Be sure to let me know if you try the lighting trick, what you think of it. Drop it in the comments. Hit me up personally, whatever.
Okay, the first SCHWAG bag play is Kevin Na, $7,200. Only 5% projected ownership, which is a good number on Na, a guy who carries a lot of upside, a guy who wins more than you probably would think. So if he does play well, he has the upside to win this event. And at $7,200, he ranks 21st in the custom model, 37th tee to green, 20th on approach, and 46th on the par fives over the last 24 measured rounds. So he's well rounded as far as the skill set we're looking for around this golf course. As far as his course history is concerned, it's not great. He got cut in 2018, T74 in 2016, and a T13 in 2015. So there's at least something that you can hold on to there, even though of course overall that's not great course history. That T74, given the new cut rules, would probably be a cut, I would imagine. But ranking 21st in the model already warrants a look for Na at this price tag. And given that he's a guy that, like I mentioned, wins more than I bet you would think. Go ahead and look it up. I bet Kevin Na's more recent wins in the last 2 years than you would probably suspect. So I like Kevin Na at $7,200, particularly because he's 5% owned, and if he wins this thing, it's a race between you and 5% of the other lineups. So the next guy that I like for the swag bag, HV3 Harold Varner III, $7,100, 5.9% projected ownership, and it was like last week and 2 weeks ago, it was like 3 times the ownership on him, and he was a few $100s more expensive. So yeah, not much has changed other than he missed one cut, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's suddenly in terrible form, right? Like it could bounce back. That's very reasonable. If he starts to string together some poor performances, of course it'll be cause for concern. But as it stands, he ranks 19th in the model, 11th tee to green, 8th on approach, 94th on the par 5. So another one of these guys that if he can just, get some birdies on these par 5s, which he should be able to do, if he can get some putts to drop, then he's going to be very live at this price tag to be someone that gets you a lot of value. So I like HV3 at $7,100. And yeah, it's crazy how just one event or just one round sometimes for these guys can just sway public opinion so much that we get him at a third of the ownership at a cheaper price now. At the same price, I like Lucas Glover, also $7,100, 8% projected ownership. And Glover's just a great ball striker, right? And the stats back that up. So Glover ranks 22nd in our custom model, 30th tee to green, 19th on approach, 63rd on the par fives. So pretty well rounded, especially for a guy down at this price tag. Um, as far as his course history is concerned, Glover has made the cut all 5 times. The last 5 times he's played around here, but he's actually lost strokes against the field over those 5 years. It's pretty crazy. T52 in 2019, T52 again in 2018, T45 in 2017, T33 in 2016, and T68 in 2015. So maybe there's not much upside in Glover, or at least it appears there isn't much upside in Glover around Muirfield. Um, but as far as a cash play is concerned, maybe if you just want someone that you can feel better about making the cut down in this pricing range, Glover makes a lot of sense. So maybe not as much upside, but I think a little more equity to maybe make the cut. So if you're feeling like a safer play down here, probably look to Lucas Glover at $7,100. I also like Eric Van Rooyen, EVR, at $7,000, and particularly like him because the ownership projection is 1.8%. And look, I'm really just going off a pedigree here. Van Rooyen's a top 50 player in the world. He's a guy that can get hot with the irons. He's a guy that has tremendous upside, really, particularly in these European Tour events. But he has, played well in some PGA Tour events before. And because he regularly plays on the European Tour, he tends to be underowned in daily fantasy contests. So I do like EVR. He's never played this event, never played this golf course, but he's been playing golf for a long time now. So I trust that during the practice rounds, he'll be able to suss out what he needs to be able to do around this golf course. As a top 50 player in the world, he should have the tools on approach to be able to pay off this salary at $7,000. And at 1.8% projected ownership, he's someone I will certainly be overweight to the field on this week. As will the next guy who we're going back to again, like maybe was this 3-4 weeks in a row or something, but man, one of these weeks he's going to pay off, guys. He's going to pay off one of these weeks. Let's hope it's this week. I think it might be this week. It's Max Homa at $6,800, 5% projected ownership, and I'm just beating the same drum. He ranks 12th in our model, 13th tee to green, 11th on approach, 55th on the par fives over the last 24 measured rounds. And Homa is just barely missing cuts, and he's just barely missing cuts mostly because he can't putt and he can't chip. So Homa at WORKDAY gained 2.1 strokes on approach and 3.5 strokes tee to green, but lost 2.1 strokes putting. Just barely missed the cut by a shot. Then at Travelers, he gained 1.4 strokes on approach, gained 0.7 strokes tee to green, lost another 1.3 putting. Then at Heritage, he gained 6.2 strokes on approach, gained 6.4 strokes tee to green, lost 3.6 strokes putting, and 2.8 strokes around the green. So Homa's striking the ball phenomenally. If we can just get a week where he is a neutral as far as his short game's concerned, he's going to be really live. Like, that was a 41st place finish at RBC Heritage, so he could top 20 if he somehow is just neutral to the field in those aspects. So at only 5% projected ownership, and he is one of the players down here getting more ownership because I'm sure more people are seeing this, right? We're not the only ones running a model here. I love Homa at this price tag, at this ownership. I will be firing up more of them, overweight to the field on him again. I'm not going to miss out when he finally figures out what's going on with that short game, because he needs to get in the lab and figure that thing out, because just grind that thing out till it's neutral, and it's going to be a top 20 for you, Homa. So I hope he figures it out, because I will own a lot of them this week. I also like the player price right below Max Homa, and that's Chez Reavie at $6,700, 7.6% projected ownership. And Chez is like, he does carry some upside. He's a guy who can get it done on approach, but it isn't really exciting, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't really excite me. He does rank 25th in the custom model, 33rd tee to green, 40th on approach, 41st on the par fives. So he's just kind of better than average everywhere. He's like good. He's like solid everywhere, but nothing really stands out for Reavie. I'd like to see the approach numbers be better, but at $6,700, you can't really beggars can't be choosers at that point. So he does stand out as a great value down in this price range. 7.6% projected ownership. It's fair. Because if you do end up down in this price range, I think he's one of two players you should be looking at between he and Homa. So I don't think you'll end up in this price range often, or I don't think you should. But if you do, I guess it makes sense that the 7.6% projected ownership, because you should be looking to Reeve or Homa. And the last player in the player pool this week, or at least that I'll be touting, and this is a bomb. I just wanted to give you guys a bomb. So if you guys are those people that just like to throw bombs sometimes and see if it pays off, look to Matthew Nesmith at $6,200, 1.6% projected ownership. Nesmith's just a decent ball striker for where he's priced. 41st in the model. He ranks 41st tee to green, 7th on approach, and 108th in the par 5. So another guy who, if he can just get a couple birdies to fall in these par 5s, or maybe somehow figure out how to be neutral off the tee, which that's not something you figure out overnight. But if he can find a way to maybe reach some of these par 5s and 2 and get some birdies, then he can make a cut. And if he makes the cut at $6,200, you will be happy with that. So $6,200, Matthew Nesmith, 1.6% projected ownership. He's the last SCHWAG bag play. I'm so excited for Tiger to be back. There should be so many more eyeballs on golf this week, which is awesome for everyone in the industry, obviously. Wish he would have come back earlier, but as I said, beggars can't be choosers, right? So we'll take Big Cat when he can come back and when he's feeling healthy. And as long as he is healthy, we want to keep him that way. So he needs to sit out as many events as he feels necessary to keep that body in shape, because we need him to be live at Augusta, right? That's really what we want to see out of Tiger. In the meantime, let's have a big week, unique week again. We got back-to-back weeks at Muirfield Village, but I think we're well equipped for it. The model performed well last week. I think it'll perform well again this week. Hopefully we get some stories of some winners from you guys, the viewers. Appreciate you guys sticking through me. This one ran a little bit long, but it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. Really excited at the prospects for this week. So make sure you throw me some likes on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. Appreciate if you download the podcast on Spotify and or Apple Music. And yeah, leave some comments for me. Let me know what you want to see me do here at the show. Let me know how I can improve. Let me know if, you have any thoughts. So appreciate you guys and looking forward to seeing you next week. Peace.